important for politicians to ask questions to their constituents to find out what people are thinking, where their pain is, right? And to really understand. And great politicians are always great listeners. An example of that was Bill Clinton. He was a great listener that when you met Bill Clinton, you just felt like he was listening and he understood your pain, right?
But if you had to sell Argentina to prospective investors,
So now let me move to the other side of it
Okay,
now, right?
okay.
Okay. So I was talking more like selling what I was honing in on there first, and I'll do both. Is how do you sell? How does Malay's most effective way to sell this to Argentinians to know there's going to be pain, short-term pain for long-term pleasure? That's one aspect of it, right? And the way to do that, by the way, is because in the United States, the Democrats are experts at that, by the way, is they link emotionally charged issues, okay, as they make them cornerstones of their platform. Even though they don't really matter for prosperity, they get people involved in things like climate change and reproductive rights that really honestly should not have a place in the economic conversation of a country, but they're very good at hijacking emotionally charged issues. You can do that, by the way, in Argentina to get people to buy into the short-term austerity for long-term prosperity by talking about future generations. It might be tough for you, but do you really care more about yourself or the future of your grandchildren? What really matters here is about what your kids are going to do and their kids are going to do and the future of this country? Or is it about, yes, it's uncomfortable right now, but if you can be uncomfortable now and you knew that in 30 years from now, your children and grandchildren were going to be in this incredible country that was thriving and the envy of the world, wouldn't you be willing to make those cuts? Like bring it past yourself and talk about the future of the country and the future children and grandchildren. That's what I would be doing. That's that. In terms of investors, okay, the most important thing, I think one of the main issues is that if I was an investor, is that the uneven history of politics here, where you have these, like, listen, Malay is the first person that really comes in with this sort of really hard-nosed, really, on-point policies that really have the potential to turn the country around, right? But people will say, well, what happens after he leaves? Who's going to carry the mantle after that? How can I be sure that that they're not going to put currency controls back on? There's going to be freedom of movement of currency. So if I was Malay trying to sell this to investors, I would essentially, that every investor is worried about that. They're worried about the Peronistas coming back in and turning it into a candy store again and issuing plans to everybody and their grandmother, okay? And so what I would do is embedded in my actual presentation, I'd be answering those objections before they ever came up. A big part of my presentation would be, this is the old Argentina and this is the new, and I'd be essentially focusing on everybody who knows anything about investing and economics will say Argentina should be one of the greatest investments of all time. It should be super prosperous. Why hasn't it been? It's been not prosperous because of corrupt politics, poor policies by the far left that have made it fashionable to be on the doles or had to have plans, right? And obviously it was massive thievery. I don't know how much money was stolen in the past by government before this, okay? So, and I think those are issues that need to be addressed. Like the downside risk, see, when someone's making an investment decision, they don't only focus on the upside potential. The upside potential in Argentina is crystal clear. It's massive. If Malay gets this right and the country has the patience, Argentina is going to be one of the greatest turnaround stories in history. So the upside is clear. But what's the downside? What's the worst that could possibly happen? And when people are making investments, they always are going to ask themselves, what's the worst that can possibly happen? Now, if you don't address it yourself, if you leave it to their imagination or to their own research, people come back and say, oh my God, he's going to leave office. He's not going to run for a second term. The next guy's going to come in. They're going to put currency controls. It's going to be the old game again. All my money's going to get locked up here and I'm going to get screwed. My investors are going to fire me. I'll lose my job at the hedge fund or the pension fund. So they're worrying about their downside. So as important it is to make a strong case for the upside, I think that's very easy. The upside here is clear. It's massive. The important is to discuss the downside risk and also explain the strategies that will mitigate that downside risk? What protections are being put in place now to make sure that if investors come back in it, because this country is so ripe for foreign investment right now in real estate, agriculture, technology. You have an educated populace. You have, just amazing land. And I mean, there's so much that going for it, the mineral, everything. All you need is to have this sort of is understand that what is that downside and make sure that downside is limited, whether it's through legislation or just explaining to people, to investors. And by doing that, I think you go a very long way of not leaving it like, don't make it the elephant in the room, as they say. Where like, you don't really want to talk about that. No, I bring up that downside very, very heavily and say, here's your downside. And let me tell you why that's not going to come to pass. What we've done to mitigate that downside. Here are the protections we're willing to put into place. And by doing that, you dramatically reduce their fear. Like they start to say, well, you know what? Because the upside now becomes huge. The downside is more limited. And that's going to lead people to invest in Argentina.